Coming to you from Orange County, California, this is the JuggLife podcast with Max Ada and Chad Wesley Smith.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the JuggLife podcast. We are here at CSA Gym in Dublin, California. I'm joined, as always, by meticulous
There we
Max
go.
Montana.
Ooh, that's a good
meticulous, except about his appearance or really anything else. And our guest today, Mr. Jesse Burdick. Jesse, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for coming along, man. Glad to be here.
Our episode today is brought to you by Big Heads and Banded Deads. It's a lifestyle. I'm really enjoying making them themed to the guests.
That was a good one.
That's good. Thank you very much.
It was one thing to just make up random lifestyle. I mean, to found actual lifestyle companies or the real companies who are sponsoring us. But now making them themed to the guest is
I appreciate it.
it's a
Thank you
very
very much.
fun
Very
extra
That works.
challenge
And I
for
mean,
me.
you have the alliteration going too. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff there. That'll sell hundreds of possible t-shirts.
It can't really be a lifestyle unless it's an alliteration.
I
I
agree.
believe that's the way it goes.
I think that is a rule.
The
Close.
Yeah, the sound.
Or it's got to
Rhyme.
have some sort of a rhyme, a rhythm to it
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, rhythm. A lot of our, no offense to our viewers and listeners, but, they're always commenting lifestyle brands, ideas of their own on the YouTube comments and stuff, and a lot of them fail to understand this rhythm.
Right.
There's a lot of nuance to it.
People will just put in two different things, like, just completely different objects or two different nouns, and that's a lifestyle.
That's true.
There's
It's got to roll off the tongue.
someone following us on Instagram, and theirs was CrossFit and macros was like their
It's not really. That was their
exercise
name.
and food.
Yeah, exercise. Well,
Yeah.
I think exercise and food would go better than CrossFit and macros.
Exercise.
Exercise and food.
But at least have some kind of
See, that should be your neck. That would be a
irony.
great. That would be a great T-shirt. Just exercise and
Exercise.
food.
Yeah, and it would be brilliant in its simplicity.
I agree. I think that would be awesome. I'll wear that T-shirt.
Yeah, especially if you put it in parentheses, exercise and food, because then it's like an insert whatever ones you
Exactly.
want.
Oh, right,
Which
okay.
is all
You just
lifestyle
interpret
brands.
exactly. You interpret it for everything and anything that's in there.
Yeah, whichever are the ones that you like.
There's a guy watching this that's already printed that shirt now. It's already coming out.
Send me one, 2X, please.
TM.
Yeah,
TM.
2X.
Yeah, TM CWS.
If you just say it, it counts. You just declare TM and it's good. You're
You just
solid.
threw out 5 fucking letters there. That doesn't really mean that doesn't hold up anywhere.
Well,
I appreciate the.
Yeah,
I appreciate it
when
though.
they hear from my lawyer, we'll see how well that holds up.
Don't you have to mail it to yourself and not open the mail? But then one day you can go to court and it's postmarked. So you could tear it open and be like, see, I discovered this a week before it came out of
I
their
think
shirt.
that's people have tried to do that, or but they've gone to court and it's never really held
I
up.
feel like that's a thing.
It is a thing. People do it, but I don't think it really holds up. Well, very much. But good luck.
We'll see. Yeah. All right. So we're here in the power room at CSA, your home base. Tell us a little bit about what you do here with the gym, with PowerWOD, and sort of how you got into powerlifting.
Okay, a lot of different stories there. But what I do here is, so I have basically the strength and conditioning side of the gym. We have the MMA side up front, the CrossFit side in the middle, and then I have my stuff back here where I train the athletes, powerlifters, anyone who just kind of wants to get strong.
Notice the distinction between athlete and powerlifter. Two
important-
separate things. Two separate things.
I think, I don't know, were you like this early on? You tried to call yourself a strength athlete?
Well,
I did.
yeah, especially having actually been
A prior athlete?
Yeah, an athlete before. Yeah, I make the same distinction of powerlifting and athletes.
Yeah. So I mean, I tried to be strength athlete or power athlete, and then after a while, I was like, I'm just a powerlifter. I was like, I'm no longer an athlete. You kind of cross that line, and then it's really hard to kind of come back.
I left a lot of athleticism in 2011.
Anytime you probably got over maybe like 220, I think for me at least was like that's when athleticism and
I was like 15 then, so.
well, yeah. See, it took me a long time to get there. But so I got into powerlifting after I was done playing baseball. I played Division I baseball in college, and then played a little bit kind of semi-pro, kind of knock around after that. Found myself
like a semi-pro knock around. How does that compare on like a Kenny Powers type of scale?
well, it's actually it's actually pretty similar, depending on where you're going to go. I was lucky because I was in upstate New York in Canada, and then when I moved out to California, oddly enough, where semi-pro ball is actually highly thought of, and there's a lot of stuff to actually do. It's not a bunch of people showing up in different uniforms and just saying, "Oh, we're here to play baseball."
No one knows what team they're on.
Exactly, it makes it hard. But when I got out here, the team that I was recruited for and playing for, the league ended up folding. So I needed something to be competitive in. I'd always thought that it'd be cool to be strong. I was a baseball player, so we weren't allowed to lift. And
all forearm curls.
it was all, yeah, you're so right.
All forearm
it was
curls.
Forearm curls and extensions and like the curly do things and like for some reason like calves. I have no idea why we did a lot of calf raises.
Well, calves, neck, and forearm are the most important body parts anyway.
That's true. That is true.
I used to coach high school football and would butt heads a lot with the baseball coach because we had athletes who were baseball and football.
Right.
And he's like, well, I don't want them to lift too much. And I was like, why do you think everyone in Major League Baseball takes steroids? Because being strong fucking helps.
Absolutely. And you're also dealing with like 13, 14, and 15-year-old kids. You're like, look, he's 100 pounds.
Yeah.
He's 6 feet tall and he's 100 pounds.
I know he's going to get so jacked.
Yeah, he's gonna. You don't want him to be muscle bound and really kind of screw up his delivery and sit back.
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
I get though why a guy like Roger Clemens had to take steroids because I've seen his training videos where when you're quarter squatting 135 on the Smith machine, steroids are pretty much the only way to get a training effect.
That's awesome.
Very, very true. But so yeah, I wasn't allowed to lift, and when I was in college, Paul Childress was my strength and conditioning coach.
Okay. University of Buffalo?
Canisius College in Buffalo, yeah. So he was lifting, and finally, kind of when I realized that I would like to kind of be strong, I went about it obviously in the wrong way, and read every muscle magazine that I could. And he eventually came and saved me and kind of showed me a little bit of the path. And then when I moved out to California, I reached back out to him. And he put me in touch with someone up here in Northern California doing powerlifting gym here, and kind of started there and just worked my way through it. And
What year was that? What year was it that
man.
you came out to California?
It's got to be close to 15 years ago at this point, so early 2000s or so, somewhere along there. I'm really bad with dates, but it's about 15 years ago, maybe a little bit more. That was the real early days of powerlifting. So I was lucky enough to have a really good kind of boss and job at the time, doing some training in San Francisco. And then the gym that I was at gave me a lot of freedom of like, go ahead, do whatever you want to. It wasn't a real strict have to do a program. So I got to play around and do a whole bunch of stuff and kind of learn on the fly like what works, what doesn't for me, and then kind of apply it. But that's when there's a lot of, the interwebs were just growing and just happening to kind of come about. So there was a lot of cool stuff coming out, but it was a lot of just like bullshit. Do you remember that guy DB Hammer?
Yeah.
On Elite Fitness.
I remember
there was
that.
people in our gym trying to do like his stuff and like all the, these secret German like strength programs and everything. So it was kind of cool because the internet was kind of coming about where you could you get in touch with and read a lot more Louis, Dave Tate, Jim Wendler, even a lot of Shaco stuff was out there with deepsquatter.com. And all that stuff was coming about, but then you had all these just trolls, just like putting out all their stuff, which was great because you could kind of see obviously who was joking around, who had a sense of humor, and then also who was gullible enough to try some secret, German throwing program.
Wasn't there a website around then? I remember that was like, you remember Kyle Gullidge? You guys remember Kyle Gullidge?
Yeah.
And there was like, I remember
him and his
his brother
too, right?
Maybe Dave was his brother's name.
Big deadlifters.
Yeah, huge. Like he was pulled like 830 at 19 years old or something. But there was like a website. YouTube really didn't have anything.
Right.
It really wasn't even like, it might not even been out then.
Like training clips only, if anything.
If anything. And there was like some guy had hosted a website. I want to say it was like, it wasn't Iron Garm, but it was like Iron Game, yeah. And it was like, all it was is just a bunch of links.
Yeah, it was just
videos that were uploaded. And there was like, I remember watching those videos and seeing like.
That was I actually lifted with that guy. He's from Northern California.
Oh,
His
yeah.
name was Hayward Blake the Fourth. He was an IPF.
Sounds fancy.
He was, or the third.
Would I know him well if I didn't know the other three versions?
I don't know if you want to know any one of them, but he was a really strong kid. But I think that was his website, and he had all that stuff up there. That's it. I haven't even thought about Hayward in a long, long time, but that's interesting. But yeah, that was his website.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So when you got into it, you were probably, 2003, it was probably like relative to like where we are now. That would have been
looks
like
completely different.
How many women would even be in like the gym at that point in time?
I think we probably had like 2 in the gym and a membership of about 40.
Totally
and like
barren.
at the meets, we didn't. We knew what raw lifting was.
Yeah.
But it wasn't an actual even category.
Yeah.
There was like single ply, double ply.
Right.
And that was it. So going to a meet, I don't remember seeing anyone until I think the first person I saw do a full meet raw was Dustin Speed, probably maybe like close to 10 years ago or so. He was the first person I saw just go all raw, and I think he had to lift in the single ply division, but he lifted raw. It was a different world back then. And I mean, meets were 20 to 30 people, probably no women, and they just took forever.
Yeah.
Just because of all the equipment and everything.
That's the same still.
So before
Pretty close.
Before we get too far into that part of things, that's the next thing we want to talk with Jesse about, is as he's been in powerlifting now for 15-ish years, seeing this sort of transition from equipped lifting to raw lifting, how that's affected him as a lifter, as a coach, and just how he sees culture change in the sport. So we're going to be back with Jesse Burdick on the JuggLife podcast. All right, we are back on the JuggLife podcast here at the PowerWOD in Dublin, California, with Jesse Burdick. And Jesse was just telling us about how he got into powerlifting back in 2003, training under Paul Childress, a pretty legendary equipped lifter. Now has been a part of the sport as an athlete, as a coach. I know elite total in 5 different weight classes, right? So you've seen a lot of things as a lifter. And an undeniable transition in the sport from 2003, where the WPO and multiply was, you were saying it was either single ply or multiply.
Yeah.
Raw lifting was not a thing. To now, maybe you go to these meets and could find one equipped lifter,
right?
If that. So how was the transition for you, competing equipped to now competing raw?
So the transition for me was pretty much an easy one, where no one was competing in double ply anymore. I think I did my last equipped meet was one of the backyard meets of the century or whatever they were called, with Mark up in Sacramento, and there was nobody else there. And
so you won.
I think I did, yes, but that's besides the point. But the whole point of all this was I needed something to compete in. I didn't want, I had no interest in being a bodybuilder and getting on stage and doing all that stuff. I wanted to compete against other people, where it couldn't be just a completely individualized sport. So I figured, well, if everybody else is going raw, then I might as well. I kind of have to go raw too.
Yeah.
So that was kind of how I just transitioned into it. It's just like, there's nobody else here doing this stuff anymore. And at that time, I had left the gym that I started with, so it was pretty much just me and a bunch of raw lifters and a bunch of new raw lifters. So no one knew how to help me put a suit on, a shirt on, and I'm squatting 900 pounds, benching over 6. I have no spotter, I have nobody to hand off to me. So it's kind of one of those things where it was, a necessity that it was time to kind of move on to something else, but also because there's just no competition anymore as far as just actual people being there. And there wasn't a lot of people to lift with, which is, part of the powerlifting that I did enjoy a lot of, is having kind of a team with you. But it's a necessity, especially when you're in equipment. So that was kind of the transition for me. And you're absolutely right, man. It's so different. Thinking back to the first meets, to like APF seniors and everything, to the big meets that we have now, that is completely the opposite. Maybe you would have one person raw back then, and now I think I've run for the past 2 years, I think I've run about 6 or 7 meets, and I can count on one hand the people that were equipped.
Yeah, and I think it's not just really not just a shift in the way that people are competing, but it's like the style and the culture of everything.
Yeah.
So last week on the Beers with Chad episode, I did a Mount Rushmore powerlifting. I identified these different eras and talked about multi-ply powerlifting era, a late 90s to 2010-ish, and then the modern era, raw lifting from 2010 to now. And Chuck Vogelpohl was my choice for the multi-ply era.
Great choice.
And I think he embodied so much of what was powerlifting culture then.
Yes,
from
100%.
just being like so incredibly hardcore. And the perfect, the picture I chose to use my extensive Photoshop skills to put him on Mount Rushmore, he had the flame beanie on.
Yes,
and
fire beanies.
Chuck Vogelpohl, bleeding out of his nose with a flame beanie on is multi-ply powerlifting.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
100%
right.
That's it.
And I mean, I know that photo well, and that's when his strap broke, so we had to put electrical tape on his strap to even kind of keep everything together. He came out and pulled that last deadlift, I think, to beat Kenny Patterson and somebody else to kind of win that year's WPO. But yeah, that's I don't know if you could have hit the nail further and perfectly harder on the head than that. That's 100% multi-ply powerlifting.
Yeah. What do you think something from that era and that culture that powerlifting today and today's powerlifting culture would be well served to learn from?
I think the intensity and kind of the focus on a lot more of a team, I think, was certainly there. And again, kind of had to being a multiply just to get in the suit, get in the shirt, and then there are just people who are wizards in equipment opposed to people who were not. So you'd find those people, you'd seek those people out so they could help you figure out how to adjust your shirt, how to put whatever on, differently, or how to kind of approach a lift, or even, how to adjust your equipment in order to make it there. So I think there was an attention to detail and intensity, because when you're lifting something, when you put a suit on and you're lifting something that's going to be close to 50 to 70% over what you can do raw, you kind of got to turn things up a little bit. It's no longer I'm going to do, a set of 5 here at 75%. That's cool. But I mean, now that you're doing, but if you can lift 500 and you got 800 pounds on the bar, you got to really kind of turn things up. So the intensity level of all the training sessions when you're equipped and going heavy for like an actual competition lift were, completely insane. And it was a lot of fun. It was very, very cool. And I think there's a lot of intensity to lifting now, but I don't know whether it's the lack of a team or the lack of the amount of people there, but the difference is, to me, someone who has felt kind of both, is definitely palatably different than from when it was kind of in the hardcore multiply days, as opposed to kind of the raw days, where, I think while, in both instances, if you're going for a max effort attempt, you're like, hey man, I could end up in the hospital after this. I think with the multiply stuff, you're like, I may never wake back up if it rolls off my back, or if it rolls up, or I don't get the spot that I need. Now it's 900 to 1,200 pounds, on the squat, opposed to maybe a 600 to an 800 pound squat. The spotters are going to be able to handle the lighter weight a little bit better. So I think there's an intensity factor that's maybe not as prevalent, but I mean, it's still there. But I think the teamwork thing is, or just the kind of sense of a team, sense of a community, is a little bit lost.
Do you think that the sort of legend of Chuck Vogelpohl kind of came about because, I mean, obviously for who he is, but like he was inaccessible? Like I remember reading about him and being like, this guy is like, this guy's amazing. And same with like weightlifting. You read about people you've never met.
Right.
And then now as the community has kind of gotten smaller because there's more Instagram and everybody is like, you might know the top lifters or have communication with them.
Yeah.
So like their reputation and legendary status is a little bit less,
For sure.
amazing. And so like, Yeah, it's kind of funny to me. Like, like Vogapol was like, even to this day, you're kind of like, I've never really like seen anything on him. Like, there's a training article here or there, and you're like, this guy's like this fucking insane monster guy.
Yeah.
That you're like, okay, like you watch the video of him pulling, 800 or whatever, and it's like it kind of gets you inspired, really, really like a lot more for your training sessions. Whereas now it's like, it's more accessible. Everything's more kind of readily available, so people maybe don't have that sense of like.
I think like the mysticism.
Yeah,
right?
like
if all you had seen was a black and white still photo. I mean, you still knew that there were flames on the beanie. Right. Black and white still photo in Powerlifting USA with a meat write-up.
Yeah.
And I think that those were written in a way to
they're a little
try to
embellished,
include
sort of.
everybody and embellish where you could.
Yeah. And a sense of epic Viking type of warfare to it. But now you could see, I mean, shit, you probably see 80% of people's training leading up to a big U.S. Open or something like that.
Yeah, it was almost kind of extra cool because you had no idea what he was actually doing.
Yeah. Well,
and then Louis would never tell you what he was actually doing because Chuck didn't lift with him at that time, so he had no idea what he was actually doing.
Right.
So it was one of those things. All you would hear is stories, and then kind of the stories, and then you'd kind of see some of the videos, and those are kind of just small snapshots of kind of the culture of what was kind of going on there at Westside with Chuck and everything. But I would agree. It's while him pulling 800 and doing all this stuff was insane, there's probably like 20 other people doing the same thing, but we didn't know about them. It was just that Louis had a little bit. He had the name out there. He was kind of he was the one that was kind of pushed forward the most.
Right.
Where if we open your phone, you probably scroll through and probably see like 16 people who just deadlifted 800 pounds last week. So now I think it's like, oh, which is hilarious. To me, it's like, oh, everybody's deadlifting 800 pounds now.
Another
No big
800
deal.
deadlift, right?
It's almost gone to the point where it's just like there's the one guy who can do it like a Chuck, and now it's just like, oh, well, someone pulled 800, lives at 165, and just kind of spin through. So,
what do you think was like the big turning point for? Obviously, people just transitioned to Raw and stuff, but like he had the Mount Rushmore with Dan on there, like that transition from like Chuck, Multiply to like, what was the first time you saw Raw lifting as like, holy shit, like there's Raw lifting is this thing that's much bigger, or was there like a moment where you saw like a Raw lifter or a particular guy or a certain meet where like now it's like, shit, this is like real?
Looking back on it, I think there was a couple of things that kind of happened. And, when it first started, it was, get fucking huge. It's all about leverages. It doesn't matter what you look like or your muscle mass or anything. Just put a suit on, put a tighter suit on. So it kind of went from that. And then you saw people kind of drift into then you saw Chuck, who was like 220 and shredded. And he was lifting with the big guys. And then Big Iron happened, where they had all these, smaller lifters. And they're hitting numbers that were competing with the big guys. Then they're putting up numbers that were just not seen by anyone under 242, and they were hanging with everybody. And they looked good, and they just looked shredded. They looked like they lifted. So there was that, and then it started to drift even more, with the with the Lilla Bridges kind of coming out, and then with kind of Dan Green. Dan Green was the first Raw lifter where and it was up at Sacramento, where I kind of looked at him and I was like, what the fuck? It's like, what just happened? And it's, I think Dan has a reckless way about the way he kind of lifts, but I mean, he's just completely committed.
Like when he does the first rep and you're like, wow, that was really hard.
And then he does 4 more. Yeah. You're like,
holy shit.
And you're like, he's been to the gym here, and I remember he's like, oh, I'm just like worked up to 700. It's like, oh, we'll see what I can get. Okay. And just grinds one out and shaking the whole time. And he's like, 3 more. I'm like, oh my God. Like, oh no. It was just me spotting him. I was like, oh God. But he was the first one that kind of turned it on to where I was like, oh wow, this is something really different. And then Milan was kind of coming along at the same time, putting up numbers. But it was, again, that was kind of a cool part too, because no one knew who he was, and they're like, is he raw? Is he not raw?
Yeah.
But he's kind of in a suit sometimes, but he's not. But he still squats over 9.
Because he'd have the Super Cup of Titans and
yeah,
stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, there was right around that time when, that was with Andre and who was the other Russian who he'd always finish second, or who would always finish second to him, or Yarnbosch. Believ.
Yeah, Andre
you had
Believ.
those guys who were kind of going back and forth between, both Yarnbosch, Milan, Believ. That was when it was just like, oh, wow, there's people who are stronger raw than they are in gear. And that's when I think the wall just kind of came down, where, when Milan squatted 900, raw for the first time, or whenever kind of that happened. And I mean, you were along the lines, kind of in the drive, probably the only American, I think.
Me and Robert Wilkerson.
Yeah.
Only
Big
American
Wilk.
squatted 900 back in 2011.
Right, and I mean, that's
That's back when 900 was a big deal. back when 900 was a big
You
deal.
couldn't find that on Instagram at the time.
No, you couldn't. And was that when did you do that the first time with that stupid mustache that you had?
Well, I don't know if it was stupid, but that meet, I did 865 at that meet. That was my second meet. And then a SPF Power Station Pro-Am Greater Cincinnati Convention Center.
Sunday.
905,
You need more of an echo when you're doing this, but you gotta. Yeah,
I'm surprised that powerlifting's never been like attached to like Monster Jam or something.
The monster
like the big
truck
truck
thing? That'd be great.
Like have a powerlifting meet in the center on like the tabletop jump, and when some guy pulls the final deadlift, like the Gravedigger drives and flies
Jumps
over the
over it.
top.
Well, they say the
That'd be
WPO is
amazing.
coming back this year, and it very well may
Okay,
be there.
so we're gonna see that soon.
Yeah.
Haven't they been saying that for the past couple of years?
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll come. Maybe it'll happen.
So outside of just the culture, though, the lifting itself, what was the biggest challenge coming from equipment into raw lifting? Maybe some adjustments you've made for your own training for people you coach.
It's the intensity versus volume, where in equipment, your volume was very low, only because you could only do you couldn't do reps in equipment very well.
And some of that's just that the weight you would do the reps with aren't going to put you through the right places.
The right range of motion. It's not going to be kind of the same kind of competition lift that you would want to do. So there was the escalating weight. You just couldn't handle much more after the kind of main session. So I would say, with the intensity being super high with the multiply lifting, the volume was very, very low. And then when you take the equipment off, and you can't do that. You go like bar, plate, 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 done. Like that's not work. That's no work. So we had to find, for me as a lifter and a coach, it was more about finding a way to force people to, force feed volume to people in ways that are, whether they knew it or not, was going to, positively affect, muscle mass, also strength, and kind of go from there. So that was the biggest thing for me. And also, I think the recovery aspect of things was so different in equipment, central nervous system wise, you're just so wiped out. And it's again because of the intensity and everything, where, not only is the recovery different with being raw, but your frequency can be much higher as well. So you're able to, turn your 2 or 3 sessions in equipment into 6 sessions over a week and get so much more out of it and be able to recover much faster and more efficiently from it as well. So, it was, the people who did go from equipment to raw with me, kind of had to really figure a lot of that out as we kind of go, because, we would know, like, we would bench, at that time, I think my bench was like 400, I'm going to just work up to, plate, 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 quarter plate, and then I'm done for the day. It's like, that's not a workout. That's not anything.
Well, I think probably when Max started powerlifting, because you were sort of the one to introduce Max to powerlifting in a lot of ways, right?
Yep.
That you were much earlier in that transition time. And though Max's upper body would tell you otherwise, maybe you guys weren't doing enough volume here.
Well, yeah. At least they're not making fun of my shoes.
That's true. That's one step ahead of it. But yeah, it was. But it was a learning process, and I mean, I do remember, way back in the day, kind of comparing kind of a Louis Westside, template to kind of what Shaco is doing, and Shaco is using a lot of raw lifting and dealt primarily with single ply. So when I started to look at that and kind of compare the two, I kept kind of the same conjugate system because just the schedule, I'd been doing it forever and it made sense in my head. But taking a lot of stuff where he did and some of the, like, not a small lot, but just what they were doing overseas, anyone who was doing a lot of single ply stuff. Yeah. We were able to take a lot of that and kind of add that in to things, and I think that helped me kind of start to mold what we're doing today.
That's too with the single ply lifting. why a guy like Milanichev, and why there's so much more carryover between those Checo equipped programs versus, I think, the more strict West Side type of stuff. If you look at a IPF single ply lifter do a squat, and you look at a raw lifter do a squat,
it's almost the same.
Yeah, they look really very much the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where if you look at Chuck Vogelpohl do a squat, and 99.9% of raw lifters squat, they have nothing.
Completely different.
Yeah, they really have
almost
nothing to do with each other.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's where you're absolutely right. That's where the carryover kind of came from, and a lot more concentration on having that the first two movements just be very dedicated to the big three lifts, opposed to really kind of blurring some of the lines with board press, shirt, throw bands and chains, and whatever else you kind of want to throw on there. It becomes a whole different thing. So kind of taking a lot of the bands and chains off the bar, and trying to perfect technique, raw technique, which is different than like you said, just different than equipped technique, double ply equipped technique.
Have you found that the kind of scope of exercise selection is just narrowed a lot?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And I mean, it's obviously there's going to be testing periods, and we're still trying to figure out what's going to work best. But we would always, as equipped lifters, I don't know if I for 5 years ever squatted except at a meet without bands on the bar. And now I don't think we just don't put bands on the bar for the squat. We'll keep them on there for the deadlift, because I think that forces people not to coast at the top and actually kind of push their hips through, and utilize more chains on the bench than than bands. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly changed what we're doing and how we're doing it. No longer are we doing, just because also shirts are gone. So I mean, we're not doing much of that. But it starts to narrow down the things, and you find the things that work the best for you, and you just repeat them every once in a while. You change some things here and there, but overall, it's really kind of cut down on a lot, because, like I said,
is there stuff from multiply lifting that was like a really multiply kind of thing that you still kind of use, even if it's maybe not the thing that you think is like the best, but you just really enjoyed it or think it was a really productive thing?
I'm still a fan of box squatting, and I still think, for me personally, I knew if my box squat was, while I was in equipment, I knew if my box squat was good, my sumo deadlift would be good. Right. So I didn't have to put much on like training my sumo deadlift a lot. I just needed.
You put like
826, yeah. And so I never pulled over 700 pounds, I think was the most I pulled in the gym, sumo, and then I'd be able to go to a meet and pull over 800. So it worked for me, and I still think like utilizing the box squat is a way to kind of trick people into using a little bit more hips if they're not sumo pullers or anything along those lines. But there's so many people who want to just pull sumo all the time and think that that's going to be the best way to do it, and try and pull heavy, and then they get themselves beat up. So I think kind of having that there and mixing that in has positively helped people a lot in that aspect of things. But I mean, out past that, and maybe like a board press for the bench, there's not a. It's actually interesting. I think kind of the raw lifters actually added more deadlift variation to my program than the conjugate system ever did before that.
You don't do deadlifts and
right. You don't ever do that. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, kind of the block pulls and more concentration on deficit stuff. That was never there. We never did any of that stuff. In multiply. Well, and again, it's just completely different sport. So when you try and do a deficit in a suit, it's just not going to. You're not going to get down there to get the bar. Yeah. So I mean, it actually kind of switching over to raw added more exercise selection to deadlift, but it certainly shrank everything up. But yeah, I would say box squats and some board press. But I mean, the board press is just kind of to kind of nail that lockout, and it's selective. You know what I mean, for people who are having a problem kind of locking that out. Trying to just overload that point is something that a board can successfully do. But past those two, there's a lot of stuff that we just don't use anymore. Yeah. And unless someone's going to come in and want to put a shirt on or get in a suit, I've probably forgot about most of it.
What do you think is the most variables you ever used in one exercise?
There was a time at the old gym that I lifted in up here, Diablo Barbell, where we would do the safety bar box squat equipped with bands and escalating chains. So you would do do a set, add a chain, do a set, add a chain. I think they called it the Grazzletron. I don't know how it got to that name. I don't know. Disclaimer here, I don't suggest you guys doing
that's
this.
That's why you really needed a team to do
Absolutely.
that kind of training. Because, I would have just given up halfway through the setup.
Absolutely. Well, you're so right, dude. You're so right. And I see a lot of people who, still want to try and put some of these things together. I'm like, I just don't even know if I have the patience to A, put a suit on, B, trying to set all this shit up.
Only one variable, I think, is if people they can change their stance, that's fine. They can change the bar with the regular stance, that's fine. Once you get to 2 variables, maybe once there's 3 different things going on, then all hell is broken loose.
That's just something that you're doing by yourself, let alone trying to put stuff on and set stuff up. So I think, I guess it would be a suit, box, safety bar, bands, and then you would be able to add chains. So like 5, then you could add, keep adding more chains. Yeah. I think, awesome. I used to screw around with, because I was trying to come up with a way to do band releasers. So
I believe Max has told me about this.
Yeah, he almost died. It was amazing. So we would set up stuff like that and try and screw around with some stuff. But past that, I don't know if they're maybe a shirt, board, bands and chains.
I like when the bands go from the top and the chains go from the bottom.
That's so right. Somehow it cancels each other out and makes you stronger.
That's muscle confusion.
Or, chains with the slingshot kind of thing. I was like, aren't these doing
that? Actually is really good. I'll argue for that one. Okay. That one is good, but the reverse. But I have seen people do reverse band board press with chains in a shirt. I have never done it, but I've seen it.
There's 1 inch of range of motion there.
That's
super hard. It's easy off the chest, it's impossible at the top, but right in the middle.
It really gets the good work in, which is what you need.
I've seen bands on occasion, too, be going not up and down, but some forwards and backwards.
Yeah. I think that's we can differentiate it, kind of between main lifts and, accessory lifts. That'd be an accessory lift just to try and force people to use their lats on their deadlifts. But on the one that you're probably talking about is, safety bar and has it in front. After a while, if you're a businessman and this is what you do, you also got to start to factor in, like, if I fuck this person up, like, this is not good for business. So if I have a safety bar that's up here and then bands that's pulling him this way, and I'm going to ask him to try and do something athletic, the chances are the chances that someone's going to get hurt or, someone's going to be like, that just doesn't look quite safe. They start to escalate, and that's where
that one might be tough to explain to a judge.
Like putting a band around your neck so that when you get to the bottom, you start to pass out.
Yeah, no.
It's called the David Carradine.
Carradine method. All right. Well, we're going to take another quick break, and we're going to be back to talk to Jesse about some ways maybe we could make powerlifting more popular, more competitive, and run bigger, better meets. All right, so we're back on the JuggLife with Jesse Burdick. And Jesse, besides being a lifter, a gym owner and coach, also runs some really big meets. Reebok Record Breakers, March Madness, big meets up here in Northern California, prize money, all that good stuff. And I've talked about this before on other podcasts and other episodes, some ideas to make powerlifting kind of more interesting to fans, maybe get it on TV. As we were just griping about how there's cornhole competitions on TV, but powerlifting and weightlifting still can't make it on there. So, what are things that you see as a meet director, ways that powerlifting can be better presented to the audience and maybe made more professional and more appealing?
So when I started doing the meets, my whole intention was to just make the lifter experience a lot better, because there wasn't a lot of meets going on here, and if they were taking 13 hours, and you're deadlifting at 10:30 at night and you've been there since 10 o'clock. So I wanted to concentrate on making the lifter experience better, mostly because of my athletes just didn't have anywhere to go. And then I would always think about, my parents, I'm sure your parents, the same thing, and you just talked about, going to a track meet and you're sunburnt and, just destroyed for 10 hours. And, just thinking about going and being a fan, I love going to powerlifting meets, but they're exhausting. They're going to be, all day long. And, if you're there for one person, they're going to be on the platform for almost 2 minutes. At best, they're going to be there for 2 minutes. So I thought about just like, okay, well, how can we keep that, keep the fans interested, mom and dad, keep people coming, because they're going to come and support whoever is going to be there. But let's make it a little bit more interesting for them. So, I kind of picked up the stuff from Jim McD about kind of the live feed, trying to make that better, trying to add commentary to it. At the meet themselves, not charging anyone to come to the meet to kind of get in here. I think that's one of the most criminal things that I see is people charging to support your kid for a minute and a half or whatever it is. So dropping that, trying to get more people in here, trying to have vendors here and almost turn it into a mild spectacle of some sort, if you will. So they can kind of go and shop. We usually have food trucks, and you can kind of get outside and move around and do some stuff to make it interesting when whoever you're there for isn't lifting, which is most of the time.
Yeah.
So I started doing that, and then, I was just like, what, I really want to do something, because I loved the WPO days. I thought they did great. I still remember, I was there when Goggins squatted 11. I was there, the infamous picture of Chuck. And those were, the place was electric. It was just awesome. The energy was crazy.
And this, for the kids at home, the WPO, World Powerlifting Organization.
Yes.
It's kind of like a one-off, really big multiply meet at the Arnold, probably flames shooting out of the stage.
Yep. Ring card girls walking around with a weight.
Was it televised at all?
No, it never got televised. The only powerlifting thing that really got televised was Hawaii Record Breakers and then the Mountaineer Cup. So my goal wasn't to try and get this on on TV or anything, but just improve lifter experience first, then kind of the viewer experience second, and then trying to get better lifters here. And I was able to hook up with Reebok and kind of pitch the idea of, incentivizing lifts. Basically saying like, hey, come here, break a world record, we'll give you $1,000, because that's what Lou used to do back in the WPO days. He would give people $1,000 if they broke an all-time world record. And I was able to find myself in a position to offer that. And that started bringing more and more people to the meets, and it kind of elevated kind of the status. And as that kind of happened, I was able to kind of fine tune some stuff, get better audio video equipment for the live feed, and try and, get more vendors, better food trucks, different food trucks here. So as far as I'm concerned, just from a meet director standpoint, just doing that, really kind of, I guess, put, our meets on the map. And, it's helped a lot. To kind of continue pushing it, I think some of the biggest stuff is you got to focus on kind of the lifters themselves. You got to bring out some characters, and you got to have people, the guy who everyone's going to love. You got to have the guy that everyone's going to hate. You don't have to WWE it where, you got these just huge clash, but there needs to be some sort of, some characters and some sort of, development so people can identify with one of the lifters, some storyline for sure. So I think that would be great. And I think just to continually incentivize the, people, whether it's at the meet or, I think it would be great if we could get to a point where we could subsidize somebody for a year, where you're like, hey, come to the meet. If you win, we're going to give you $40,000 for the next year. Something along those lines. I think not only would you get a lot more people here, but now you're gonna start to pull some people from some of the other sports who are like, well, shit, if I spend 3 months busting my ass and lifting for this meet, I have a really good chance of being able to just kind of cruise for the next year, or however they're gonna go ahead and think it. So I think something like that, continually putting up money, trying to develop characters, and just trying to, even if it's just like having a dedicated YouTube channel to it or something, and just having the meets visible is gonna, increase, awareness of who these lifters are, what they're doing. And then maybe, you can think about like, okay, cool, we see, like my lifter Kaler, right? You go see him deadlift an all-time world record, and then you follow him around at home, he's playing with his dog, he goes to the gym, like that whole stuff.
Getting to know that human interest stuff is a huge piece.
I think
that's what people love at the Olympics.
Right.
They latch on to Fucking curling, yeah.
Story.
Curling won the gold medal in the Winter Olympics this year. No one gives a shit about curling.
You're gonna get so much crap for that.
Did you know that there's like 900,000 people who do curling in Canada?
There's
or something?
curling. So I looked this up. There is curling in Oakland. There's a curling deal, and one of the lifters at our gym works at the ice rink and said he can get us in.
Well,
apparently it takes forever. It's like you do 10 throws 8 times. It takes like hours to do. It's exhausting. Yeah.
You could get really drunk during that time. but it's like no one gives a shit about the sport of curling itself. But everyone was getting behind this team, because they knew that the guys were like regular guys. They're like working at Ace Hardware, and curling to try and support their Olympic dream and getting to know people beyond the sport, whatever it is. I think it is a huge piece of the attraction. So you've been able to work with Reebok in supporting the meet. I know you've also had lots of interactions with Rogue and stuff like that. Do you think that powerlifting could be made into a viable enough thing where one of those where bigger sponsors are willing to come on board and give some real support to it?
No. Very unfortunately, but very honestly, no, I don't. I think that, again, it was because there's so much infighting in powerlifting where if Rogue was to go ahead and get me, you, and 6 other people, from around the world to talk about powerlifting, we're all going to have really clashing opinions. We're all going to, I hate this person or I hate that person or this federation, that federation. There's too much, it's just spread apart too much. And there's no one organization.
So powerlifters are the problem, not powerlifting.
The sport itself is great. I don't even know if it's the lifters. I think it's a lot of the people who are, sometimes putting on the meets, starting these organizations. And look, I'm not, knocking anyone for trying to make a living or anything along those lines. But you know what? I make no money off the meets that I run. I literally make zero. And it's for the lifters, and it certainly helps me, visibility-wise, just here and globally. But it's not a money maker. So if people are going into it trying to make money, I think it kind of really spoils things a little bit because if people were able to kind of just really get behind a couple of people who are the leaders in what's going on, that would be great. But we have I can't tell you the backlash that I've had when I put up money for all-time world records. Like, well, why not the Masters? Why not this? Why not only Raw? Fuck you. I'm like, guys, Jesus Christ, no one's put up $20,000 for a powerlifting meet ever. Ever. That's when I started. But I get so much backlash for it. It's like, shouldn't we be happy that like someone is going to walk away with maybe someone's going to walk away with a couple $1,000? Like, why can't we be pumped about that? And it's I don't know if it's the culture or what it is, who it is, but I mean, there's just this aspect of it just seems like there's so many powerlifting trolls more than any other sport out there where, it's very, very hard to take a step forward because you get a backlash from every direction possible. And it's hard to want to take a step forward knowing that you're just going to get a bunch of shit thrown at you. Exactly. So, I mean, it's unfortunate, but I think it's going to be very hard. I think, we're seeing more and more individuals start to be able to shine and start to kind of get picked up by some of those companies, and they're going to be supported because they're consistent, good lifters. They have, a good story to them. They look pretty good. That's going to be, those are the people who are going to succeed. But as a sport overall, I think it's going to be, it's going to take something drastic or really, really interesting or a new way to kind of make things go, and a lot of support from everybody in powerlifting to make it happen.
Largely, I agree with you that it would be very difficult to unify all of these, not necessarily opposing, but individual groups in it. Yeah. It would really take like one Saudi prince who just fucking loves powerlifting.
Totally.
And it's
just
like
buys it all.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, US Open, that's cute prize money, and then I'll just put up $1 million.
Right.
Yeah, it's $1 million because that shot out of the ground in my backyard this morning.
Absolutely.
And I love like that DBX Fitness Championship, that CrossFit competition. That's more money than the CrossFit Games.
Yep.
How much is it?
They were getting like $25,000 per event.
Yeah.
Plus, they were flying people to Dubai and putting them up for like 2 weeks.
And they were getting
I had to go to
appearance
that,
fees too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the overall like the winner was I think 250,000, but if they won all the events plus the overall,
wow,
they would have won like 500,000.
Right.
It was
hilarious.
Very lucrative.
pretty crazy. Well, cool. I think we covered a lot of good stuff. Max, any other?
No, that's good. I think we summed it up that powerlifters are non-athlete trolls.
Did we really do that? That's pretty much the podcast. Damn it! I was trying to make it better.
Well,
yeah, we polished a turd. Called it powerlifting. No.
It's about as good as you can.
Jesse, where can they follow you, learn more about you?
PowerWOD.com, Jesse Burdick on all social media outlets.
You can find me, Max_8 on Instagram or on Facebook. You can email me, max@jtsstrength.com.
And if you like the podcast, go on iTunes, give us a 5-star review, write us something funny or nice. Maybe I'll read it on the air, but I didn't pick one out to read today, so maybe I won't read one today. But when I do remember, that person could win something.
There you go.
We always appreciate that, and it helps more people find the JuggLife. If you're interested in coaching for powerlifting, weightlifting, strongman, power building, and super total, visit juggernautcoaching.com. Subscribe to our YouTube. 3 videos a week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, brought to you by the world's strongest videographer, Shorty Sedang. And upcoming events, I don't know when this episode's going to come out, so I don't want to say them and be wrong. Yeah, so that's it. You can find the JuggLife on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. I'm Chad Wesley Smith, at Chad Wesley Smith and at Juggernaut Training on Facebook and Instagram, filling up your newsfeed all day. This was another episode of the JuggLife Podcast. Thanks for watching and or listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, man.